I'm Liz Faublis, and this is Currents. In this election year, a long-term survival plan for the country with faith at its foundation. Plus, in the culture war, the stakes are high.
And trying to think about what it means to be Christian and how to respond to these so-called assaults to culture, our faith, conscience, freedom.
And tradition and diversity at an academy in Ozone Park.
Because the church is universal. So in its universality, it encompasses people from all ethnic groups, races from across the world.
Well, last night, during the final debate ahead of 12 key primaries, GOP candidates once again were asked to defend their stance on faith-based issues. This time, birth control became one of the hot-button topics of the evening. Well, suffice it to say, the contraception question posted by a viewer via the web was not well received by the audience. However, once the chorus of boos had subsided, Republican candidates managed to weigh in.
There is a legitimate question about the power of the government to impose on religion activities which any religion opposes. That's legitimate.
Sort of along the line of the pills creating the immorality, I don't see it that way. I think the immorality creates the problem of wanting to use the pills, so you don't blame the pills.
There was no requirement in Massachusetts for the Catholic Church to provide morning after pills to rape victims. That was entirely voluntary on their part. There was no such requirement.
I would say that I've always been very public, that as President of the United States, I will defund Planned Parenthood. I will not sign any appropriation bill that funds Planned Parenthood.
Well, issues of morality, family, faith, and values have fueled heated debates among candidates and between the government and religious leaders in the past few months. An HHS mandate approved last month, which requires that most Catholic institutions provide insurance coverage of contraceptives, including potential abortifacients and surgical sterilization, fueled a firestorm of criticism from U.S. bishops worldwide who argued that the rule violated religious liberties. Well, all that said, one author maintains we are in the midst of a moral crisis. Jay Richards, co-author of the book Indivisible Catholic, Restoring Faith, Family, and Freedom Before It's Too Late, joins us now to discuss what got us to that point and what can be done to restore culture and revive economy. Jay, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Liz. Good to be with you.
Jay, in the soundbite we just played from last night's debate in Arizona, we hear the GOP candidates discuss issues that you talk about in your book, including family values. The topic was birth control and the right of the government to impose their power on religious values. Do you find that these politicians, who are often on opposite sides of these debates, agree on at least the underlying moral issues, like you state in your book?
Well, in many cases, I think they do. I mean, there's a difference between policies and fundamental principles, and so we as Catholics know you have to apply prudential reasoning to apply our basic principles into policy. So in many cases, I think the GOP candidates, for instance, all agree on the intrinsic value of individual human life, which my co-author, think is the most fundamental moral and political principle that we could possibly have, but they may apply it a little differently. And so I think if there's any good that's coming out of this HHS mandate is that it is actually bringing many people of faith, diverse group of people of faith, together around some of these fundamental principles.
Jay, why is this book so important now? And I understand you also have a Catholic version of the book's website, indivisiblecatholic.com. Why are these two so important now?
Well, I mean, just the last 2 weeks, as we see, we were told that the economic issues would be the only thing that would dominate the 2012 election. And, of course, they're important, but the so-called social issues that were supposed to be on the back burner are now on the front burner, issues like religious freedom and marriage and life. And we actually think the reason the book is called Indivisible is that these economic and social issues go together. You can't divide them. You know, the single best predictor of childhood poverty in the United States is whether there's a father in the home. So the moral and the economic and social, they all tie together. And we're convinced that to really restore the culture and return it to safe harbor, that Christians of different denominations and groups have to work together, especially evangelicals and Catholics that share some fundamental principles in common. We need to be rowing in the same direction.
Do you agree, as some proponents of the book have said, that Washington's reach exceeds its grasp with respect to faith and other issues?
Absolutely. I mean, the Health and Human Services mandate is an example of this, because now we're not just talking about, say, abortion being legal, but the government literally compelling Catholics and other religious people to directly violate our conscience things that we think are intrinsic moral evils. And so this is the greatest sort of violation, not only of religious freedom, really, I think, but of limited government itself.
Well, Jay, as you know, we can't watch TV or log on to the internet without a first-hand view of war somewhere. Now, you say now there is yet another war waging. What is this cultural war that you describe in your book?
Well, fortunately, at the moment, it's not a war with bullets and tanks, but it is a war of fundamental ideas. I mean, we have now in political debate not just various policy arguments, but arguments over fundamental principles. In previous generations, people didn't argue about the nature of marriage. They didn't argue about, fundamental identity of human beings. Now those things are up for grabs. So the question of whether we're going to protect whole classes of human beings, that's a part of political debate. Whether a marriage means between a man and a woman, that's up for political debate. And we think this is a very consequential culture war, not just over policies, but over fundamental values.
Now, Jay, you touch upon some real tough moral issues facing Catholics today, including abortion, God, politics, marriage, economics, even terrorism. Now, how does the book bridge political questions with spiritual answers without sounding as if you're preaching?
Well, of course it's tricky to handle that, but we actually think there's a perfectly useful way for Catholics to understand that we as Catholics understand and believe certain things precisely because they're truths of the faith, but we also have public arguments that we can make. And in the book we provide what we hope are good theological explanations for these political issues, but also we want to provide arguments and ways of explaining this to our fellow Americans that may not necessarily agree with us. And finally, we do actually think that while the 2012 election and things like that is important, that Christians will really not fully restore the culture unless we ourselves are transformed by the power of the Holy Spirit.
So you think we can arrive at what you call a proper separation between the distinct authority of the church and state? You think that's possible?
I do think it's possible, and if you just look at church history, at the very darkest times, that's when the light shines the brightest. And my co-author and I think that we're at one of those times right now in which there's both a lot of reasons to be depressed about what's happening in our culture and in politics, but we're convinced there's also a renewal underway in the church as well.
Jay, you know what? History shows that getting everyone on the same page is difficult, if not impossible, in a lot of cases. Now, if history is any guide, society may not be able to come together to restore our culture and revive the economy. Is it possible we can have a world with enough Christians willing to fight issues that contradict their faith?
I do think that's a good question and the right question. The good news is that if you sort of look at the way cultures change, it's not everyone necessarily agreeing with everything, but it's a group of dedicated individuals that are all rowing in the same direction that can help change culture. I mean, that's how the British Empire defeated and abandoned abandoned slavery in the complete empire when it was against their economic interests. That wasn't because of majority rule. It was because of a few very influential people pushing hard for several decades that they were able to transform the British Empire.
All right, Jay, thank you very much. It was very interesting reading. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Liz.
And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. When we return, a popular Catholic speaker arms for battle in the culture war. Welcome back. Well, the contraception mandate, efforts to redefine marriage. Defenders of traditional values may argue that the United States is the battleground of a culture war. And among the warriors, Dr. Peter Kreeft, a professor of philosophy at Boston College and a popular Catholic apologist. Dr. Kreeft has authored more than 45 books. He's considered an expert on the writings of C.S. Lewis. Well, this past weekend, he spoke at the Church of St. Catherine of Siena in Manhattan on winning the culture war.
We are at war. We're not at peace. We thought we were. We were wrong.
We're here today to discuss the questions of culture, especially the so-called culture wars, and trying to think about what it means to be Christian and how to respond to these so-called assaults to culture, our faith, conscience, freedom. And Dr. Kreeft helped us to understand what are the parameters, what are the horizons, and what are our responsibilities in fighting the culture war.
All of life, from the fall to heaven, is spiritual warfare. But there are certain times in human history where one of the forms of that eternal and invisible spiritual warfare between good and evil manifests itself as a culture war.
Well, a cultural war is a war of values within a culture. Civilization is more the material aspect, and culture is more the spiritual or value aspect of a people. Christians are supposed to pray for peace. Christ said he came into the world to give peace, but it was his peace, not the world's peace. It was peace with God and peace with yourself and peace with your neighbor. It wasn't peace with the world, the flesh, and the devil. So there's a war between Christ's peace and the world's peace.
What is at stake in this war is the eternal survival of human souls. Whether our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will see God face to face or not. Those are the highest possible stakes. And the terrifying gift of free will that God has given to us means that we will cast the deciding vote.
I feel very optimistic about Catholics learning to fight like spiritual warriors in the culture war. I'm very optimistic that the John Paul II generation is coming to power in the church, both among the laity and in the clergy. The tide is definitely turning.
We have winning weapons. We have human nature, which was not designed in Harvard or Hollywood, but in heaven. We have human reason, the natural ally of faith. We have our faith and our hope and our love. We have the faith, the truth from God.
I guess the most important thing I said in my lecture is the most obvious thing. The way to win the culture war is the same as the way to win heaven. Just be a saint. That's the meaning of life.
And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. Still haven't decided what to do for Lent? How about looking out for some words of wisdom on Twitter, of all places? We'll have that story and the rest of the day's headlines next. Welcome back to Currents. I'm Liz Faubles. Coming up in just a bit, it may still be February, but it's springtime for a Catholic Academy in Queens. It's our latest School of the Week. But first, let's have a look at the day's headline. Well, a federal court struck down a law that required pharmacists in Washington state to dispense the morning after pill, even if doing so violates their religious beliefs. Luke Goodrich of the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty said the ruling sends a clear message. No individual can be forced out of her profession because of her faith. The Becket Fund represented 2 pharmacists in the case. The ruling comes just over a month after the Obama administration first announced that most religious organizations would be required to cover contraception, sterilization, and some abortion-inducing drugs in their health plans. And the Catholic bishops who have been vocal in their opposition to the mandate have issued another rallying cry. National Catholic Register reports that Bishops' Conference President Cardinal Timothy Dolan and Bishop William Lori, who chairs a committee for Religious Liberty, sent a letter to their brother bishops. In it, Dolan and Lori urge bishops to contact legislators to voice support for the Respect for Rights of Conscience Act. The bill would prohibit businesses and individuals from being forced to violate their consciences through the health care reform measure. Meanwhile, a new survey from Rasmussen Reports shows that only 38% of likely voters support requiring employers to cover the morning after pill without copay, and 50% of likely voters oppose the requirement. From Virginia, a bill that would require women seeking an abortion to get an ultrasound is now in doubt. Catholic Governor Robert McDonnell had initially supported the measure, but yesterday announced changes that would make the ultrasound optional in most cases. McDonnell asked lawmakers to amend the policy. The updated bill still requires women to get an abdominal ultrasound before an abortion, but makes a more invasive ultrasound optional. And from Iran, execution orders may have been issued for a Protestant pastor who is in prison for refusing to renounce his faith. The American Center for Law and Justice, which has been closely following the case, says the latest news is not encouraging. The pastor was arrested in 2009 after complaining that his son was forced to read the Quran at school. Well, can't decide what to do for Lent? You may want to hit the Twitter spear for the 40 days. The Pontifical Council for Social Communications is encouraging people to follow Pope Benedict on Twitter. Since yesterday, themes from the Pope's Lenten message have been posted, with a new theme set to appear each day. Vatican Radio reports that in the coming months, other speeches and documents from the Pope will be tweeted in similar ways. And from the virtual world to the real world, Pope Benedict met today with priests from his diocese, the Diocese of Rome. Benedict told the priests about the importance of their vocation to serve the Church.
Io non sono anonimo senza senso nel mondo, c'è una chiamata, c'è una voce che mi ha chiamato, alla quale seguo. e la mia vita dovrebbe andare un entrare sempre più profondamente nel cammino della chiamata.
Benedict encouraged the priests to do all they can to make Christ known. Meanwhile, the beatification process for the founder of a popular Catholic movement is underway. Rome Reports has those details.
He's considered one of the most charismatic people in the 20th century. In 1954, the Italian priest Luigi Giussani founded Communion and Liberation, one of the most active movements of the Catholic Church, operating in 70 countries. When he died 7 years ago, the then Cardinal Ratzinger attended his funeral as the representative of John Paul II. Yesterday was the first step in the process of beatification. Communion and Liberation formally asked the Archbishop of Milan to open the process of investigating the life, virtues, and holiness of Monsignor Giussani. In the coming months, there will most likely be an official opening of the process to show that he was a saint. During his life, Luigi Giussani proposed living Christianity as a personal encounter with God. He proposed to also do so through art, music, and literature as a way to heaven.
And stay tuned, there's more currents ahead. When we return, New York is a diverse city, and an academy in Ozone Park reflects that.
Our students are very diversified. We have students whose families trace back to all parts of the world.
Finally tonight, there's the education children get in the classroom, and then there's the education they get from life experiences. A Catholic academy in Ozone Park recognizes that and is giving its students plenty of both. Divine Mercy Academy is a model in diversity. Although its students all live here, the student body is made up of a wide range of ethnicities. And as we found out when we visited the school, it provides one more opportunity for the children there to learn and grow. Divine Mercy Academy in Ozone Park is our latest School of the Week.
Divine Mercy Catholic Academy was established 5 years ago in 2007 from a merge between Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Mary School and St. Stanislaus Bishop and Martyrs School. Our academy is based on over 85 years of tradition from both schools, following strong Catholic traditions as well as ethnic traditions. Because the church is universal. So in its universality, it encompasses people from all ethnic groups, races from across the world. And I think we see that here. Our students are very diversified. We have students whose families trace back to all parts of the world.
And I think that adds so much to the school environment and to the life of each of the children, that we are really enriched by what every child brings to the table.
God's message was to love everyone. So to be able to really love everyone, you have to be able to appreciate differences. I am enriched every day by the diversity in the school because the children that come to me, they're from different backgrounds, they have different experiences, different things that they bring from their own homes.
And I believe that every child here feels very welcomed and very accepted, whatever their background is.
Because our school has a mixture of different cultures, it's almost like the students are growing up, making friends and not seeing them as different. You know, if you talk about Martin Luther King and you talk about, in history when, everything was separate and they couldn't be friends, the idea to them is completely crazy. They almost can't understand how the world was like that.
Children don't see prejudice. Children don't see race. Children don't see color. That's put into their minds from outside sources because they just see each other as a classmate and a friend, and they do get along very well.
I think we've moved from that image of the melting pot to a patchwork quilt. Everyone has something to bring to the picture. We just don't get all assimilated into one big pot. We live in New York City, and they're going to leave here. They're going to go into high schools that are diversified. They're going to be traveling. Hopefully, they're going to have careers and be successful adults in this city. And I think that when they have experienced the diversity here, that certainly brings them into the whole wider world. That will be their future.
We're known for our academics. Our academics are very strong. Our state test scores are very good. We're above diocesan, state, and even the city levels.
The faculty here at the school is very dedicated to making sure that the students succeed.
Students work well when they have a schedule, they have a structure. They know work comes first. You know, we work in the morning and we can party in the afternoon if it's a special occasion. May I have your attention, please? Please stand for the prayer.
Diversity could be seen as a spiritual concept.
Jesus loves diversity. After all, his Father created us differently to show that we are individuals. You know, we have our own thoughts and our own opinions, and we're not all the same. He didn't make us all the same. If he made us all the same, it'd be boring. Diversity adds excitement in that, both to the church and to the world. So definitely, Jesus is in favor of diversity. And you know, when we get up to heaven, I think we can see how diverse it is, more so than probably what we know now.
And that is all for this edition of Currents. Coming up tomorrow, taking to the runway to help the less fortunate in Haiti and Uganda. Until then, be sure to visit us online at currentsny.net, and we are also on Facebook and Twitter. For all of us here at Currents, I'm Liz Faublis. Thank you for watching, and have a great night.